So, I want you to just picture something for a second.
Okay.
Picture yourself running a marathon, but, not one of those fun, organized city events.
Right, no cheering crowds.
Exactly. No crowds cheering on the sidelines, no one holding up those, witty signs or handing you the little paper cups of water.
Oh, that sounds miserable already.
It is.
Mm.
You are out in the middle of this barren, just cracked earth desert.
Wow.
The sun is absolutely beating down on you. Your muscles are screaming. Your lungs are burning. And you are entirely, completely alone out there.
Just completely isolated.
Completely. And meanwhile, society is standing somewhere way off at the finish line, right? And they've got this megaphone, and they're just yelling at you to, push harder.
Dig deep.
Right. Dig deep. Find your inner grit.
Yeah, we hear that all the time.
We really do. We treat resilience like it's this solo, grueling endurance event. Like, it's just this measure of how much pain you, as an individual, can quietly tolerate without totally breaking down.
Which is, frankly, an exhausting way to live.
It's exhausting. But we hold up this idea, right? The lone wolf. The person surviving against all odds. We treat that as the ultimate gold standard of human strength.
We really do. I mean, you see it everywhere.
Yeah, it's in our movies, it's in all those self-help books, it's deeply embedded in our workplace culture. But if we look at the stack of research sitting on the table between us today, it suggests that this whole narrative is just fundamentally flawed.
Completely flawed.
Right. So, for today's deep dive, we are looking at the work of sociologist Dr. Ann Maston. She has spent decades studying how human beings actually survive severe adversity.
Decades of data.
Exactly. And our mission today is to really explore the science and, honestly, the soul of what she calls community resilience.
Because the biological and sociological reality is just so different from that lone wolf myth.
It really is. We're going to show you how human beings are actually designed to face down the absolute worst things life can throw at us. And spoiler alert, it's not as isolated islands.
No, it says the United Front.
Right. So let's just get right into it. Because this lone wolf narrative, it's
just a cultural myth. And a really dangerous one, honestly.
Dangerous how?
Well, we have individualized a concept that, scientifically speaking, was never meant to be carried by one person alone.
Okay, unpack that a little for us.
Sure. So the broader sociological data from Dr. Maston's research shows that we tend to treat resilience like it's a biological trait, like eye color.
Oh, interesting. Like you either have it or you don't.
Exactly. Or we treat it like a muscle that you just need to flex harder while staring in the mirror. But the data shows that this approach actively sets people up for burnout.
Because they're trying to do the impossible.
Right. When you examine the historical and the empirical reality of human survival, isolated endurance is almost always a precursor to failure.
Wow. A precursor to failure. That goes against everything we're taught.
It does. The core theme in Dr. Maston's research is that resilience is actually a shared resource.
A shared resource.
Yes. It's this highly dynamic ecosystem,
Mm.
and it is built on trust. It's built on cooperation and connection.
So it's not just about me being tough.
Not at all. And once you recognize that, it changes the entire framework of how we prepare for and recover from, any kind of hardship.
Man, a shared resource. That completely reframes the whole conversation for me.
It's a huge paradigm shift.
So to really grasp the mechanics of how this shared resource operates, we basically have to throw away that visual of the solitary marathon runner.
Throw it right out the window.
Good riddance. Because the research gives us a very different visual to work with. Dr. Maston defines community resilience as the collective ability to adapt, recover, and grow.
And she uses a very specific metaphor for this in the literature.
Right, the woven fabric.
Yes, the woven fabric.
Let's break that down, because I love this analogy. Let's think about the tensile strength of just a single fiber, like, let's say a single thread of cotton.
Okay, a single thread.
If you take that single thread and you pull it from both ends, what happens?
It snaps immediately.
Exactly. It snaps.
Yeah.
It has almost zero capacity to bear weight or withstand tension on its own.
Right.
And in this sociological model, that single thread represents the individual person facing a crisis all alone.
Because there is a very hard biological and psychological limit to the tension one human can handle.
Yes. But if you take thousands of those exact same highly fragile threads and you weave them together
In an interlocking pattern.
right, in an interlocking pattern, suddenly you don't just have a bunch of weak threads, you have a textile. You have a literal safety net.
And this is the crucial part. The intrinsic nature of the cotton hasn't changed.
Right. The cotton didn't magically turn into steel.
Exactly. It's the exact same fragile material. But the relationship between the threads has fundamentally altered their collective capacity to bear weight.
That is just wild to think about.
It is. The structural integrity of that fabric comes entirely from the friction and the connection between the individual pieces.
Okay, so let's apply a crisis to this fabric,
Sure. Let's say we drop a really heavy weight onto that woven net.
like a boulder.
Yeah, a boulder. And that boulder represents a massive community crisis. Maybe it's a natural disaster or, a total economic collapse.
Something huge.
Right. When that boulder hits the net holds.
It doesn't snap.
No, it holds because it distributes the tension. The threads that are directly under the boulder, obviously they stretch, they are taking the brunt of that initial impact.
Sure, they're feeling the weight the most.
But the threads that are 5 feet away, or
wow.
even 10 feet away, they are also taking on a tiny fraction of that load.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the force of the impact is shared across the entire surface area of the fabric.
That distribution of impact is just incredible to visualize. I mean, the exact same threads that would snap under, like, an ounce of pressure on their own are suddenly catching a 100-pound weight.
Purely because of their structural relationship to each other.
Okay, but this leads us to a really critical question about this whole metaphor. What is the loom? Like, what is the actual mechanism that weaves these individual people together into a functional fabric in the first place?
Well, the source material actually outlines 3 specific active elements that bind a community together.
Okay, what are they?
Trust, cooperation, and shared resources.
Trust, cooperation, and shared resources.
Exactly. And the text makes it very clear. Without those 3 elements functioning continuously, you do not have a fabric.
What do you have instead?
You basically just have a loose pile of string.
Oh, man. A loose pile of string.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. You can have 10,000 people living in the exact same urban high-rise complex.
Right. Physically super close to each other.
Occupying the exact same geographical footprint.
Mm.
But if there was no trust, no cooperation, and absolutely no sharing of resources.
They're just unattached threads.
Exactly. They remain unattached.
Yeah.
And so when the crisis hits, the impact is going to crush them individually because there is no mechanism there to distribute the load.
A loose pile of string. That is such a stark, almost like haunting description of modern urban isolation.
It really paints a picture, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, we live closer together now than ever before in human history. We are physically stacked on top of each other in these cities, but so many people are just existing in that loose pile.
It's the paradox of modern life.
But, thinking about this research, it actually offers a massive amount of psychological relief.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, if you are listening to this deep dive right now, and you are feeling just entirely overwhelmed by a personal crisis.
Right.
Maybe it's a severe financial strain or a terrifying health diagnosis or even just the compounding weight of watching the global news every day.
Which is heavy enough on its own.
Seriously. And if you feel like you are failing because you can't just quietly shoulder it all, well, this data says you were never supposed to.
No, you weren't.
Blaming yourself for breaking under that pressure is literally like blaming the single thread for snapping.
That's a great way to put it.
The problem isn't the thread. The problem is the absence of the weave.
Exactly. The relief comes from realizing that this expectation we have to withstand the storms of life purely on our own individual grit, it's scientifically unsupported.
It's a fake expectation.
It is. It is a failure of our social architecture, not a failure of your personal character.
Oh, I love that. A failure of social architecture.
Because if you look at the biology, the human nervous system evolved over millions of years in tight-knit cooperative bands.
Right. We are tribal by nature.
So isolation actually registers in the human brain as a state of literal physical threat.
Wow. So our brains panic when we're alone.
Yes. When we try to sortify ourselves in isolation, like by building these huge emotional walls or retreating into what some call hyper-independence.
Right, the I don't need anybody mindset.
Exactly. When we do that, we're actively working against our own biology.
That's so counterproductive.
It really is. All that energy you spend trying to become this invulnerable lone wolf. It would be vastly more effective if you directed it outward into the weaving process.
Into building the trust and cooperation.
Yes, because that is what actually provides functional resilience.
Okay, so let's take this whole concept out of the realm of metaphor for a minute.
Let's do it.
Let's look at what actually happens in the real world when that fabric is violently tested. The research notes we have provide these very concrete case studies of communities facing just acute catastrophic hardships.
Yeah, the real-world data is fascinating.
So we have data here from a major natural disaster. It was a massive Midwestern flood back in the late 90s, right?
Yes, a really devastating event.
Mm.
Entire city grids were submerged.
When you read through the documentation of how this specific town responded, I mean, the water was rising 50 feet.
50 feet. Unbelievable.
It was wiping out municipal infrastructure in a matter of hours. Bridges, roads, power lines, just gone.
And municipal agencies were just completely overwhelmed.
Right. But the community's response wasn't a retreat into individual bunkers.
Yeah.
The residents didn't just hoard canned beans and lock their doors.
Which is often what you see in the movies, right? Every man for himself.
Exactly. But the text details how these emergent groups just formed instantly. They organized these massive, completely decentralized sandbagging lines.
Right.
They established ad hoc food distribution centers right out of people's dry garages. They even created these neighborhood patrol networks to go around and check on the elderly and the vulnerable.
They literally acted as the net.
They became the safety net in real time.
And sociologically, this Midwestern flood case study is just a classic demonstration of resilience because it illustrates what we call a dual victory.
Okay, a dual victory. Break that down for us.
So the immediate actions of the community achieved two entirely distinct things at the exact same time.
What was the first?
The first, obviously, is that the practical survival needs were met.
Right, stopping the water.
Exactly. The sheer logistics of moving enough sand to hold back a rising river or making sure thousands of displaced people have clean water and enough calories to survive.
It's a massive undertaking.
It's huge. No single municipal agency can execute that level of coordination alone in an emergency. It requires collective action to provide that physical barrier to the floodwaters.
Okay, so that's victory number one. Physical survival. What's the second victory?
The second victory is what really fascinates sociologists. It's the psychological component.
Oh.
Think about the very act of standing shoulder to shoulder on a sandbag line for like 14 hours a day.
Exhausting, muddy work.
Very, but doing that drastically strengthened the community's social bonds. The acute crisis basically forced them to exercise the muscle of cooperation.
I see.
You had people who had lived on the exact same street for a decade without ever speaking to each other.
Which is so common.
Right. And suddenly, they are relying on each other for their physical survival. The friction of the disaster actually wove the fabric tighter.
Okay, but wait. Let me push back on that for a second based on the text.
Sure.
If a town is hit by a 50-foot wall of water, they aren't suddenly inventing trust out of thin air while they're swimming out of their living rooms.
Right. Right, you can't just spawn trust in an instant.
Yeah. Because the text notes that communities with strong social bonds recover faster. So doesn't that imply that the foundation actually had to be there before the flood? Disasters don't just magically generate cooperation. They must just reveal the trust that was already humming in the background. Is that right?
That is a crucial distinction. You hit it right on the head.
Okay, good.
Sociologically, a disaster acts as a catalyst and a magnifying glass.
Magnifying glass, I like that.
It very rarely creates entirely new behavioral frameworks from scratch.
Yeah.
The baseline of trust absolutely has to exist beforehand.
Even just a little bit.
Yes, even what we call weak ties, like just knowing the face of your local postal worker.
Right.
Or just exchanging a nod with the person who runs the corner store when you buy coffee. That establishes a baseline.
Yeah.
And the flood activated that latent network.
Gave everyone a shared goal.
Exactly. It provided the intense, shared focus necessary to pull those loose threads tight.
But what if a town doesn't have that?
Well, the research shows that if a community enters a disaster completely fractured-like, if they are characterized by deep-seated hostility, severe economic segregation, and zero established trust.
Oh, man. That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It is. The crisis will often shatter them even further. The trauma just exacerbates the existing fault lines.
That makes total sense.
The foundation of the loom must be threaded before the storm hits. That is why the pre-disaster social environment is actually the most accurate predictor of post-disaster recovery.
Wow. Pre-disaster environment predicts the post-disaster recovery. That really makes the stakes of just everyday neighborliness incredibly high.
It really does. Saying hello matters.
But, you know, the most striking detail to me in this flood study isn't even about the speed of rebuilding houses.
Right. There's more to it.
Much more. The text explicitly highlights that the highly connected communities maintained significantly better mental health outcomes months and even years after the waters receded.
Yes, the long-term data on that is very clear.
And I just want to understand the mechanics of that. Because we understand how a sandbag line saves a physical house, right?
Right, it stops the water.
But how does organizing like a neighborhood food drive translate to lower rates of PTSD and depression for the individual who still ended up losing everything?
That is the million-dollar question in trauma research.
Really?
Yes, because culturally,
Yeah.
we view trauma as a localized injury,
Meaning what?
meaning we think of it as something happening exclusively inside one individual's brain, like a broken bone, but in the mind.
Right. My trauma is my trauma.
Exactly. But let's go back to the net catching the boulder metaphor.
Okay, the boulder.
In this context, the trauma itself is the weight of the boulder.
Oh, I see.
When a community engages in collective action, when they physically share the burden of the disaster, when they grieve the loss of the town square together, or when they muck out each other's flooded basements.
Yeah, that terrible, muddy cleanup.
Right. When they do that together, they are acting as a neurological buffer. They are literally distributing the psychological trauma across the network.
Distributing trauma. That is incredible.
Because trauma thrives in isolation.
Of course it does.
When an individual is totally alone with a catastrophic loss, the sheer cognitive and emotional density of that event overloads their central nervous system.
It's just too much data to process.
Way too much. It triggers a chronic state of hyperarousal. The fight or flight system gets stuck in the on position.
Which leads to the PTSD.
Precisely. But when you are side by side with 20 other people, physically filling those sandbags, the trauma doesn't magically vanish.
Right, the flood is still happening.
But its density is altered. The shared physical labor and that mutual vulnerability, it provides a sense of agency. It proves tangibly to your brain that you are not abandoned.
So wait, that means the collective action is literally a mental health intervention happening in real time.
Yes, it is co-regulation on a massive scale.
Co-regulate.
The human nervous system constantly relies on social cues to determine safety. Seeing others actively work toward your survival and you actively working toward theirs, it downregulates the stress response.
It tells the brain we are safe because we have numbers.
Exactly. It prevents the psychological impact of the flood from calcifying into this isolated despair. The community metabolizes the trauma together. They bear the load, so no single individual psychological structure is completely crushed by the weight.
You know, that entirely shifts how I view those news clips you always see after a tornado or a hurricane.
Which ones?
Like where you see neighbors out in the street cooking whatever meat is left in their defrosted freezers on some salvaged charcoal grill.
Oh, yes. Handing out food to everyone.
Right. Handing out paper plates to anyone walking by. I always just thought of that as like a quirky human interest story they play at the end of the broadcast to make us feel good.
Most people do.
But you're saying it isn't just a feel-good story. That is the actual mechanism of psychological survival.
It is the loom working in real time.
Wow. Okay, but surviving the acute phase, just making it through the flood or the storm, that's really just the baseline, according to the research.
Right. Survival is step one.
Because the text introduces this much more ambitious concept for the aftermath. The literature insists that true community resilience is not just about bouncing back to how things were.
No, it's about bouncing forward.
Bouncing forward. Let's dig into that. Because when we hear the phrase bouncing back, I think the immediate image for most of us is a rubber band.
A rubber band is the perfect analogy for that.
Right. You stretch a rubber band, you put it under extreme tension, and when you let go, it snaps right back to its exact original shape.
Exactly as it was.
It is completely unchanged by the stress it just endured. It hasn't adapted, hasn't learned anything. It just survived the tension and returned to the status quo.
Which isn't true resilience.
Exactly. But bouncing forward, the text suggests, is not a rubber band. It is a muscle.
A muscle, yes.
Let's think about the actual physiological process of building strength in the gym.
Yeah.
When you put a muscle under intense stress, like lifting a heavy dumbbell,
Right.
you are actually creating microscopic tears in the muscle fibers. You are intentionally causing physical trauma to your own tissue.
That's why you're sore the next day.
Exactly. But during the recovery phase, the human body does not just randomly patch those tears to return the muscle to its previous weaker state.
No, the body is smarter than that.
It overcompensates. It heals the fibers back thicker, denser, and stronger. It adapts the architecture of the muscle so that the next time it faces that exact same load, it will not tear.
The muscle bounces forward.
The muscle bounces forward. I just love that visual.
It's a flawless parallel for post-traumatic growth on a community level.
Okay, so map that onto the community for us.
Sure. So bouncing forward means the community refuses to simply clear the rubble, rebuild the identical flimsy fences, and retreat back into their isolated routines as if the flood never even happened.
Right. They don't just snap back like the rubber band.
Exactly. Instead, they critically evaluate the ad hoc support networks that they were forced to invent during the darkest hours of the crisis.
So during the flood, say they created those emergency phone trees?
Yes. Or they shared childcare systems in the local high school gym.
Or those communal tool lending libraries to gut the houses?
Right. Bouncing forward means they recognize the immense ongoing value of those structures. They realize, hey, this is making us stronger. So they institutionalize the net.
They don't just pack the net away in a box just because the boulder was finally removed.
Precisely. They weave those structures permanently into the fabric of the town.
Give me an example of what that looks like.
Well, maybe that ad hoc food distribution center in the garage. It becomes a permanent, community-owned cooperative grocer.
That's brilliant.
Or that informal group of neighbors who checked on the elderly during the power outages. They form a permanent, officially funded wellness committee.
So the hardship is literally digested.
Yes, it is digested and utilized as the raw material for long-term sociological growth. The disaster tore the fabric, absolutely. But the repair process wove in significantly stronger threads.
Because now they have institutional memory of how to help each other.
Exactly. And that equips the community not just for the next 50-year flood, but for the daily grinding challenges of ordinary life.
Taking the absolute worst event in a community's history and using it as the foundational blueprint for a better society, that is an incredibly powerful concept.
It gives suffering a functional utility.
That's a profound way to look at it. But understanding the sociology of a Midwestern flood in retrospect is one thing.
Sure.
But actually picking up a spool of thread in your own daily life is another entirely.
It's much harder in practice.
It is. How do you, the listener, actually weave this fabric in your own neighborhood, or your apartment building, or even your remote work company?
Well, thankfully, the source material doesn't just leave us with metaphors.
Right. It gives us a playbook.
It provides a deeply practical, 5-step playbook for cultivating this collective strength.
The 5 pillars.
Yes. Build connections, share resources, create support circles, celebrate together, and plan collectively.
Let's really explore the mechanics of each of these because this is the actual architecture of the safety net we've been talking about.
Let's dive in.
Okay, so the first step, build connections. It sounds almost deceptively simple.
It does sound basic.
The text advises simply reaching out to neighbors, colleagues, or local acquaintances. But, in our current hyper-individualized culture, walking across the hall to knock on an apartment door just to introduce yourself,
It feels terrifying to most people.
it feels incredibly intrusive. We are conditioned to treat our private spaces as these, impenetrable fortresses.
We really are. But the discomfort you feel about knocking on that door, that is a direct symptom of the isolation epidemic.
Oh, wow. A symptom.
Yes, we have pathologized basic human interaction. But establishing that initial connection is the non-negotiable first step of resilience.
Because you can't weave a fabric without touching the other threads.
Exactly. You cannot weave a fabric without first touching the adjacent threads. And building connections doesn't require you to become deeply, intimately best friends with everyone on your block.
Thank goodness, because I don't have the energy for that.
No one does.
Yeah.
It's just about establishing a baseline of visibility and geographical familiarity.
What does geographical familiarity mean in this context?
It means just knowing the names of the people who live within 100 yards of you.
Okay.
It is understanding their basic routines, like just knowing that the person in apartment 4B works night shifts.
So don't vacuum the hallway at noon.
Right. Or knowing that the couple across the street has a toddler. That basic mental mapping of your social environment creates the preliminary friction required to hold the weave together.
Just acknowledging that other humans exist in your space.
Exactly.
And the text directly links this visibility to the second pillar, which is share resources.
Yes, step 2.
But it makes a very specific point to define resources. It says offering time, skills, or support. It deliberately does not focus on financial capital.
That definition is absolutely critical here.
Why is that distinction so important?
Because when modern society hears the word resources, we immediately default to money.
Right, writing a check.
Exactly. But in the specific economy of community, resilience, time, physical skill, and focused attention are infinitely more valuable currencies.
Really? More valuable than money.
In this context, yes. Earlier, we established that trust is the loom holding the fabric together, right?
Yes, trust, cooperation, and shared resources.
Sharing non-financial resources is the physical act of minting that trust.
Okay, so how does that actually work in practice? How does, fixing a neighbor's fence build structural resilience for a whole neighborhood?
Consider this. Think about the elderly neighbor who struggles to carry groceries up the front steps of your building.
Okay.
The resource you possess in that moment is physical mobility. And maybe 5 minutes of your time?
Right, it costs me nothing but 5 minutes.
Exactly. When you consistently offer that resource, you're doing so much more than just transporting heavy bags. You are demonstrating reliability.
I'm showing them they can count on me.
You are proving through your actions that you are observant of the vulnerabilities in your environment and that you are willing to expend your own physical energy for someone else's benefit without demanding an immediate transactional return.
The non-transactional part is key.
It is everything. Or perhaps you possess a specific cognitive skill, like you know how to navigate complex, bureaucratic paperwork.
Which is a nightmare.
It is. And maybe a neighbor is completely overwhelmed trying to appeal a medical bill. Sitting down at their kitchen table and offering that skill is a profound resource transfer.
It's an act of deep care.
And these small, non-transactional exchanges are literal deposits into a shared trust bank. They prove to the network that the safety net is operational.
So when the big boulder drops...
People will only trust the net if they have seen it hold weight during the quiet times.
Man, that shifts the whole interaction from a sterile transaction to a living, breathing relationship. You are building a track record of mutual reliance.
Exactly.
And I think that leads perfectly into the third pillar, create support circles.
Step 3. This one is vital for the individual threads.
The material specifically instructs us to form small groups that check in regularly. Now, I have a question about this.
Sure, go ahead.
If the ultimate goal here is community-wide resilience, like the entire town surviving the flood, why does the playbook emphasize small circles?
That's a great question.
Like, why not just advocate for a massive neighborhood-wide digital message board with 500 people on it? Wouldn't more people mean more resilience?
It seems intuitive, but no. The emphasis on small circles is rooted deeply in evolutionary psychology and the cognitive limits of human intimacy.
Cognitive limits.
Have you ever heard of Dunbar's number?
I have, yeah. But refresh my memory for the audience.
Sure. Dunbar's number dictates that there's a strict cognitive limit to the number of stable social relationships a single human brain can actively maintain. It's usually around 150.
Okay, so we just literally can't care deeply about 500 people at once.
We biologically cannot. A massive digital message board with 500 members is excellent for disseminating logistical information.
Like, hey, Main Street is closed for paving.
Exactly. It is the perfect tool for announcing a road closure or finding a lost dog. But it is a disastrous environment for emotional support.
Why is it disastrous?
Because large groups naturally breed a psychological phenomenon known as the bystander effect.
Oh, right. Someone else will handle it.
Exactly. And online, that's coupled with a highly performative atmosphere. If someone posts to a 500-person forum that they are experiencing a severe mental health crisis,
Most people will just scroll past.
the vast majority of readers will assume someone else is handling it. Or they will just offer superficial emoji-based platitudes, like a praying hands emoji.
Because true vulnerability is just impossible in front of an audience of 500 complete strangers.
It is. You need a safe container for that kind of honesty.
And the small circle is that container.
The container is everything, small circles. And we're talking groups of 4, 5, or maybe 6 people who have explicitly committed to regular check-ins.
Right.
They provide the required psychological safety for genuine vulnerability. In a small group, absence is immediately glaring.
Oh, that makes sense. If 1 out of 5 people is quiet, you notice.
Exactly. Nuances in tone, a forced smile on a video call, or a sudden change of behavior, these things are detected because the cognitive load of monitoring 5 people is manageable for the human brain.
Whereas monitoring 500 is impossible.
Right. If someone in a tight support circle goes silent for 3 days, the other members recognize it as a severe warning sign, not just a blip in an algorithm.
They realize, oh no, thread 4B is under tension.
Yes. These small, intensely connected circles function as the load-bearing pillars within the broader community net. They forge that deep, intimate trust that allows individuals to voice their needs long before a personal crisis reaches a catastrophic breaking point.
I see. So the massive community network is the broad net that catches the floodwaters or the economic collapse.
Yes,
But the small support circle is the tight, unbreakable knot that prevents the individual thread from just slipping out of the weave when the pressure gets too high.
that is a perfect way to visualize it.
Which leads us to the fourth pillar, and I'll be honest, this one initially threw me off a bit.
Step 4 can be counterintuitive.
It is. The fourth step is celebrate together.
Yes, celebrate together.
The text notes that sharing joy and gratitude strengthens bonds. Now, we're sitting here discussing the mechanics of surviving trauma, natural disasters, and systemic hardship.
Very heavy topics.
Super heavy. So focusing on joy and celebration in the middle of a survival playbook seems almost, I don't know, frivolous at first glance.
It only seems frivolous because our culture views resilience exclusively through the lens of suffering.
What do you mean by that?
We hold this grim assumption that resilience is only forged in the crucible of terrible events, like you only get stronger when you're miserable.
Yeah, that's exactly what I assumed.
But that is a fundamental misunderstanding of human neurobiology and social bonding. Shared joy is not a luxury. It is the mortar between the bricks of the community structure.
Okay, the mortar between the bricks. Walk us through the sociology of that. How does a block party equal resilience?
Okay, think about it this way. If a neighborhood only ever interacts when there is a house fire or a flood or a neighborhood watch emergency.
Which is how most neighborhoods operate.
Right. If that's the only time they talk, the relationships within that community are entirely defined by stress hormones.
Oh, wow.
The connection is built entirely on cortisol and adrenaline. That's this highly reactive, exhausting state of being.
Yeah, I'd avoid those neighbors just to lower my blood pressure.
Exactly. You cannot build a durable, long-term social structure out of pure, unadulterated emergency. It leads to severe collective burnout.
That makes total sense. So where does the celebration come in?
Celebrating together, whether it is organizing a summer block party or sharing a meal for a cultural holiday, hosting a community garden harvest, or just gathering to acknowledge a neighbor's retirement.
Just positive stuff.
Yes. Doing that creates a crucial emotional reservoir.
You are stockpiling positive experiences.
You are literally building an active surplus of positive regard, goodwill, and shared neurochemistry, specifically dopamine and oxytocin.
The bonding hormone.
Yes. When you laugh with your neighbors, when you share a moment of genuine gratitude, you are solidifying the emotional and neural pathways of connection.
Oh, I see where this is going.
So when the disaster inevitably strikes,
Like the floodwater coming down the street.
you are no longer just helping a random geographical neighbor out of a grim sense of biological duty.
Right.
You are dragging heavy sandbags alongside the person you laughed with at the barbecue last July. You are sharing your generator with the family who brought hot meals over when your child was born.
You actually care about them.
You care deeply. You are drawing down on that deep reservoir of shared joy to fund the grueling, physically demanding work of recovery.
So without the joy, the work is just too hard.
Exactly. Without the emotional capital generated during times of celebration, the community will bankrupt its empathy during times of crisis.
Man, that completely flips the script on disaster preparedness for me.
It's a totally different way to prepare.
We obsess over stockpiling canned goods and bottled water and flashlight batteries in our basements.
Doomsday prepping.
Right. But we don't realize that hosting a neighborhood potluck is actually a highly effective form of emergency prep.
It is the best form of prep.
Celebrating together is literally weaving the safety net while the sun is still shining.
Beautifully said.
And that perfectly sets up the fifth and final pillar of the playbook, which is plan collectively.
Step 5. The culmination.
The instruction here is to work with others to prepare for challenges, whether those challenges are personal, localized, or communal.
Right. And the fifth pillar is the culmination of the entire resilience ecosystem. It marks the evolution from reactive survival to proactive strength.
Proactive strength.
Yes. If a community has diligently built connections and shared their resources and established tight support circles and filled their emotional reservoir through shared celebration,
They've done the work.
they have done the work. And because of that, they possess the structural integrity to actually look at the horizon together.
They aren't just bracing for the boulder to drop anymore.
No,
They are actively scanning the cliff face to see if a boulder is loose.
exactly. Collective planning is the acknowledgement that future challenges are an absolute certainty.
Because life always happens.
Life happens. But collective planning means refusing to remain passive victims of circumstance.
What does that look like practically?
It looks like a neighborhood association mapping out exactly which residents have medical equipment that requires power and planning a generator sharing protocol months before the winter grid fails.
Oh, that's smart. So nobody is scrambling in the dark.
Right. Or it looks like a small support circle openly discussing the warning signs of a member's depressive episode and agreeing on an intervention plan before the crisis hits.
Wow, just addressing it head on while everyone is calm.
Yes. Or it looks like coworkers establishing a mutual aid fund to cover basic expenses long before the company announces any layoffs.
There is immense psychological safety in knowing that a plan exists.
Huge safety.
And even more safety in knowing you're not solely responsible for executing it all by yourself.
That's the real relief.
Collective planning just strips the fear of the unknown of its paralyzing, isolating power. Like if I know my neighbors and I have a detailed practiced protocol for a severe weather event.
The storm sirens sound different.
Exactly. The sound of the sirens doesn't trigger the same level of autonomic panic. The physical threat of the storm remains entirely real, but the terror of isolation is eradicated.
Because proactive planning is the ultimate mature expression of the woven fabric.
It's the highest level.
It is a community intentionally stress testing and reinforcing its own weave before the external tension is ever applied.
So they don't have to figure it out on the fly.
Right. It ensures that when the crisis does arrive, the community does not squander precious time and cognitive energy just trying to figure out how to cooperate.
They've already done the math.
They simply execute the cooperation they've already negotiated, practiced, and planned.
This really brings everything full circle for me.
It really does connect all the dots.
We started this deep dive dismantling that culturally ingrained myth of the lone wolf. You know, the exhausted marathon runner in the desert, grinding it out alone, trapped in the belief that true strength is only measured by quiet, isolated suffering.
A myth we need to leave behind.
Definitely. And the research we've explored today just completely shatters that illusion.
Into pieces.
So, to you listening, if you take only one thing away from this entire exploration of Dr. Maston's work, let it be this. Healing, survival, and lasting strength are not personal solo endeavors.
No, they are not.
They are an inherently collective reality. The network of care, hope, and possibility that we deliberately build together, the trust we foster through small actions, the resources we share, the profound joy we celebrate.
That is the real work.
That is the actual, tangible mechanism that allows human beings to withstand the unthinkable.
Absolutely.
Resilience is never just about you. It is, and it always has been, about us. We are the woven fabric, and the tighter we weave it, the more weight we can hold.
The functional truth of human nature is that our survival depends entirely on our interconnectedness.
It's beautiful, honestly.
It is. But as we synthesize the breadth of this research, there is a final lingering implication of this woven fabric model that demands some really deep consideration.
Okay, lay it on us. What's the lingering thought?
Well, if we fully accept that our resilience depends entirely on our connections, right? On being woven tightly into the net.
Yeah.
What happens to the isolated threads before the crisis hits?
Oh.
Because every listener knows people in their neighborhood or in their workplace or in their broader community who are entirely disconnected.
The people who slip through the cracks.
The people who slip through.
Yeah.
The individuals left completely out of the woven fabric, whether by their own withdrawal, by circumstantial hardship, or by systemic marginalization.
The ones not on the phone tree.
Exactly. If a community is true, functional strength is determined by the completeness of its collective weave. How does the presence of those entirely isolated threads compromise the structural integrity of the entire community when the disaster inevitably arrives?
Wow. That is a haunting and necessary question. Are we ultimately only as resilient as our most isolated neighbor?
That's the question we have to face.
That is something to really sit with and perhaps act on long after you turn this deep dive off. Keep looking out for each other and keep weaving the fabric.